Welcome in. Appreciate you hopping in and taking a listen to some different things I'm looking at in regards to technical analysis for ticker AMC. It's your boy Nick. Just wanting to pop in here. I know I've been a bit MIA lately. There's been good reason for it. I always put family first, so when things come up, I take time to make sure they're resolved. Everything's good on that end. Just wanted to bring some light to it. I know there's some key points in there where a quick video would have been great. Well, I fully agree with you. I would have loved to be getting a video out. Just some things came up that desperately needed my attention. So appreciate you guys' patience, sticking with me. There's some big things I'm looking at going forward, some explanation I want to give to things. So just looking to hop right into it. As always, not a licensed financial advisor. Just have a Series 7, 63, and the SIE. Not currently sponsored by a firm, so anything that I do say, just take with a grain of salt. We're obviously dealing with some of the most manipulated stocks within the market, so depicting them from a TA perspective has its own challenges, but it's best to kind of increase those probabilities. So just want to give you a sneak peek of some things that I'm looking at in the near term, both from a macro and micro perspective. So as always, starting on the daily chart, last couple years here, I just threw in a couple trend lines here, kind of from, instead of a regression channel, this is more of a aggression channel, I guess if you want to call it that, an ascending support line that we've seen historically back into 2019. If I zoom in a little bit further back here, just some key lines I'm looking at as we're moving forward. And then you got demand and supply zones kind of within here, along with VPR. These will come into play later in the video. Just wanted to give you a macro perspective before we kind of hop into it, and some different scenarios. We got CPI first thing in the morning, so depending on when you're catching it, could already be out. I know this is a late recording getting in here, so just things within that nature can change it. So I'm always going to give scenarios based on CPI reaction and different broad market dynamics that could influence the price here. So hopping in here, last video I kind of mentioned these three lines here in regards to our cup and handles prior to our big movements, about 14.5% from top here to the top of the breakout. I did mention that you had that 200 SMA curling down on the daily to where it was almost lined up identically with this top here for the handle. So I gave two scenarios. I said we could reject off of this daily line and come back down, kind of give us a handle early, but the demand behind AMC here said otherwise. So mix of different things coming out in regards to the APE preferred equity unit and different sort of demand shifts. You got phase 6 rolling into play here on September 1. A lot of these firms are prepping for that, along with some margin requirement changes at the end of July. So that video in regards to the APE preferred equity units, along with kind of phase 6 and how UMR works and different steps these guys are taking from the prime brokers, the ones owning the shares, along with institutions, to prep for the volatility and changes. That will actually be taking place in another video. I'm going to break it up into two. It's going to be a lot of meat within that video, so this one is more so a technical analysis based on macro and micro trends I'm looking at and how that could play into a factor. So hopping into it here, just want to give you more of a macro kind of standpoint. If we zoom in a little bit, just so we get a more closer view here, you got your 50 EMA, 200 SMA, your VPR, and then obviously your OBV, your RSI, different things within that nature. These are TTM scalper indicators within Thinkorswim. Don't necessarily pay a ton of attention to them on the macro. These are just kind of laying on here from micro strategies that I've been using, but they could play a factor later on. So don't want to take up so much of your time. I know it's probably early if you guys are viewing this, so want to get this in before market opens so you guys can take a look at it first thing in the morning. So two of these zones here, kind of these gray lines, I will zoom in a little bit closer here. Let me give you more perspective. I want you to be aware of a couple things within. So these These two brackets here are kind of some of your lower portions within the VPR gaps that I'm looking at in regards to both some that used to act as a demand zone that flipped into a supply and are retested, but these two gaps are the major ones, and then the one on the bottom and the one on the top are just a little bit more macro ones, so I can show you how that kind of breaks down here. So let me zoom out, give you a little bit better perspective. Maybe I can zoom into this here. That can help us out a little bit. Sorry about that. Okay, so if we're in here, you got your red lines in the back showing your option expiration dates within. So I just want to take a look to show you things that I'm looking at here and what is some potential factors at play going forward. So we got these aggression lines, ascending supports within. Kind of anything over this white line is usually where we see our biggest movements. Then the breaks of the green is where we usually see our strongest breakouts. So if you notice here, we're kind of flirting with some of these figures here, trading in and out of these trading ranges due to low gaps within the VPR. So if I zoom in just to the past year, just so I can get a better depiction on these VPR gaps that I am looking at, there are a couple things I want to bring to light here. So let me use on the three year. One sec. This looks much better. There we go. So this is just the last 3 years of VPR on the right here. So kind of what I'm looking at and what I saw once we broke that line or this kind of zone here was a nasty uptick on Monday, brought us up to 2750, kind of a key figure I mentioned. If we break that 22.5 zone, we're gonna go suck up to 2750, 28 region. This isn't a I told you so, this is just kind of showing how the market works in regards to some of this stuff here. So the retrace off of Monday, I wasn't upset by it. I was surprised by the movement. I wouldn't have minded to kind of come up here and then get our retrace back down to give us kind of that handle formation for the bigger movements, basically today, as in Wednesday. But this is still a good scenario in regards to a technical perspective, but I want to give a couple scenarios in regards to CPI and what can come of it. So these channels here are going to be pretty important. I think they may kind of keep us into this channel lock until we can break back through the top and kind of reclaim new zones. But in the meantime, I do still want to take a peek at them on the daily candles. So we can tell here we got the body close up above, and then they slipped us out pretty heavy today at a low of around 2181, I believe, was the low. So we tested the bottom of this channel here. You can kind of see how it's been acting as a support throughout. But the only downside, so there's two scenarios here that I see playing out into tomorrow. So tomorrow, let's say CPI somehow comes out bearish. I don't understand how it really could, but you know how the figures get. It could be bearish, and we could drop the markets a bit. So the bearish scenario, kind of get this one out of the way first, is we came up and closed around 22.45, and then in the after hours we came all the way down to 21, ended up closing right around 22 figure. So that puts us roughly on this trend line, just a little bit above. What I want to see tomorrow, like if there is a bearish scenario and CPI comes in poorly prior to market open, the good thing is that we have this VPR gap almost lining up identically with the 200 SMA. So a breakout above, coming back and retesting it and kind of claiming it as support would be a very good kind of 1 to 5 session outlook on a potential zone of strength that I want to kind of get confirmed as of tomorrow. So if CPI comes in bearish, don't freak out, but there is a chance that AMC could come down and test kind of a 2075 level. somewhere within that region, kind of fill up more of this VPR gap here, and bouncing off the 200 SMA before kind of curling up to make that uptrend. That's kind of the lowest I see it near term, and that's a very bearish scenario. If somehow they continue to drag this thing down with poor CPI data and poor market conditions, that's a possibility. You do have kind of the 13G of BlackRock closing out nearly half of their position on AMC. That one's going to come up in the phase 6 APE preferred equity unit video, but that is, people think that that's not a good thing, and that means that this run is going to be kind of exhausted and tapered down to a lower level. I don't particularly see that, because what it is they're offloading their equity position. They've kind of exhausted it from a lending perspective. That was their main form of income and is their main form of income. So with phase 6 coming up, they have to offload those shares. On the panel, the director of this phase 6, it's kind of funny this is the case, I believe he's still the director, is Mark Pierciani. He is on the panel for this kind of phase 6 URM phases going forward. So he's actually a director, and he's within BlackRock risk management. So to my understanding, what that was, and I believe it was on 731, was them as a prime kind of offloading their bag, even though they're selling at a loss, and basically taking risk off the table, because they aren't the ones that want to get held with the bag when these things do run, because they know they've overlent it 4 to 5x conservatively. It's kind of an infinite loop that a lot of people are considering. So when they closed out those shares, I think it did a good thing for AMC, because it takes a massive share lender out of the play, or at least that cuts their shares in half, and it releases that volume into the open market. So that way we're kind of able to get a nice push up here, along with earnings and different things within that nature, and demand outshifting it. But to me, that's bullish. Seeing that from BlackRock, don't want to hit on it a ton. We'll cover that within the phase 6 video. So basically what I could see is these firms are starting to prep for some major volatility within it. So what would be the best case scenario, at least with this bearish scenario that I'm talking about, is a retest of 2073, 2075 mark, where we'll bounce off the 200 SMA. And I would kind of want to get that bounce here, come back up, and we could do a little bit of accumulation here, kind of give us something like this, and then move into next week. That's the bearish scenario. So if they want to carve this out, there is a chance we can kind of trade within this region into Friday, low 20s, upper 21, and kind of start our movement next week, and that's when the real fun begins. Bullish case scenario is CPI comes out great, not great, but better than expected, I guess. I would say 8.7, 8.8 or lower. Markets should have a nice rally off of that, and in turn, I know we don't always see it with AMC, but I do see some upside within. So pre-market wise, from a bullish scenario, and we'll get into the 180-day 4-hour here shortly. Pre-market wise, I wouldn't mind us coming back and kind of testing right underneath this trend line on a candle. It'd be nice just to stay above it, so we don't have to. That's about 21.75 mark, and kind of slide up this ascending support line, and then get our movement, get a nice uptick back up to 23, 24, potentially into the 25.50 range, and kind of get a really good confirmation of a nasty handle here. We got the gap fill out of the way. I'd love to see that. Just in a bullish scenario, I don't want to see us drop too much below 21.75 in the pre-market. If we want to kind of get a nice carve out, that usually sets us up for a strong movement within the day if they want to do that. So we could see let me zoom back here just a little bit, maybe a 21.50, 21.25 leading up into CPI data, and then hopefully, depending on whatever that comes out with, that's when we see our push up. It's about an hour before open. So lows in the morning, 21.25 is what I'd like to see for a low in the pre-market, followed by an open anywhere within 21.75 up to 22.45 is ideal for me. I don't want to mess with these gaps too much anymore. So that would be the bullish scenario. Open up around there, get a nice retest of this 24 level, and go up and potentially test 25 to 26.75 end of week. That's being pretty conservative. I think if CPI comes out bullish, like this test of this previous supply zone is going to be very, very possible. And then obviously the good old next week, we could see that movement coming into next week. But these zones here, just to kind of depict them better, it basically represents, so these two are obviously up a BPR, but it's cool to see how this kind of operates because historically up here, this actually used to be a demand zone, come back in, pop out, come back in, pop out, and you could say your supply zone was up here. Well, eventually, demand zones can sometimes flip into a supply zone, and that's kind of what happened here. Created a new temporary demand zone, came up and tested supply, dropped back down through, blipped, came back up, but then you have your 200 SMA, kind of got it rejected. Came back down to the demand. Here's another shift, so demand to supply. Got back down, tested some demand zones, really didn't have a ton of strength here. Just this was what, January, beginning of January, like this was kind of where memes didn't see a whole lot of movement. And then we got another shift, so went from demand back down to supply. This is now supply zone. And we kind of traded within these regions, got some nice pops to test up. First test, you got your second test, third test, and your fourth test pushed us through. Just going to highlight that fourth test part because that's pretty important within AMC's movement here. But you kind of see this is a declared demand zone. Maybe down here you can consider it potentially supply when the market volatility was going nuts. But here is your supply zone with your demand zone. What I'd like to see is a shift within these. So I'm a momentum kind of channel trader. This is beautiful to see. So our previous demand zone went up, tested our supply zone, came all the way to the top, kind of got that engulfing candle there, which is great to see. And then we turned this supply zone temporarily into a demand zone. At least that's what it's being portrayed as currently. Because we went from here, tested the supply zone, the tops of it, you can kind of see the significance in the history, came up, broke through, switched back into this supply zone, which really wasn't tested a ton previously, outside of these marks here. And now, from a bullish standpoint, I would like this to be a confirmed demand zone, just in the near term. So, demand zone, you don't have to go down and touch the bottom. Of course, this is just VPR, but I would love to see this region kind of flip to a demand zone, so that way we can kind of get our next bullish movement up. That's just a quick little history on those. I'll switch over to the 180-day 4-hour, just so you can get a better perspective here of movements. So take out VPR. I know it's a little bit challenging to see that if you're watching from a phone, so give me a quick second here. I still have these zones highlighted, just so that we can keep an eye on them. I think they're going to be important going forward. So the highlighted zones, these two again are your VPRs. Just kind of trading between different gaps here within that level, and these are just old supply and demand zones. But from a 180-day 4-hour perspective, there is screaming to be a lot of similarities to me that honestly really intrigue me. And this will kind of play into both the bullish and bearish scenario here. So I think what they're wanting you to believe is that this is kind of the cycle path that we're in, that we're ending March and kind of entering this distribution phase to kind of trickle back down. I don't want to completely count that out. The probability of that being the case is very slim for me, but I know how these hedge funds operate and what they're trying to inflict within you guys. So there's a chance that's what they're trying to instill, making you guys believe that there. But in my opinion, this is just a previous supply zone that we flipped to demand, went up and tested a supply zone. We're coming back down to retest kind of our breakout levels. Also now this hopefully demand zone, and then we'll kind of get this curl back up. That'll be extremely healthy from an RSI perspective and a movement perspective in regards to AMC. So this ape equity unit is really speeding up the process for this phase 6 and firms prepping for that. So that's why I don't think we're at the end of March. I truly believe that we're something within here where we're getting this kind of little bit of a downtick. I don't think we're going to get this waterfall type action. We could, off of bearish CPI, bounce off of here, and then kind of come back up and then have our breakout either early next week or potentially Friday. But bullish scenario, I really think that we come down, maybe test this 2150 region, potentially. It doesn't have to happen, but we could come down, test this region, and then really start our uptick. Maybe potentially something like this. Or a retest up here of higher levels, like maybe come up and test that 2385 mark, 24 region early, and then kind of just get a little bit of an accumulation day tomorrow, which wouldn't be bad. Like if we're looking at around 65, maybe 75 million volume on an accumulation day, and we only move up or uptick to about 24 region, that would be beautiful for me. That would signify that this is being treated as a demand zone. We're still in a healthy movement of this cycle, and we have plenty of upside to go. So tomorrow, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Maybe an early test of 24 region, slight cool off, and then maybe close down beneath here around 2350, 2375 in a bullish scenario. We could break it, and then just go straight up and retest 2550 or higher. It's just within this kind of rotation of movement. You usually have an accumulation day in here before you get your big uptick to confirm your change in behavior, and that's your final confirmation within the demand zone. This being a demand zone and this flipping to a supply zone, which I truly believe potentially by the end of the week, this could be flipped to a demand zone. So don't want to give out too much hopium, but bullish scenario, I think we could test that 27.5 region very much so again before the end of the week. If that gets broken, we could see some potential action into the 30s. I don't know if we'll quite get that this week, but I do see some big upside to end the week off here. Potentially 30 to 32 in an extremely bullish scenario. On a conservative bullish scenario, I think 27.5 to about 30 is very possible. Maybe retest the tops here on these bodies around 29.30 before we get a retrace, which I'll cover in another video. That's bullish scenario. Bearish scenario is we do come down, retest this 2075 mark, kind of accumulate through here before we start our next leg up, which will likely bring a close on the week around 21.75, 22 level, or all the way down to 20.75. So low 20s or upper 20s. There's not a ton in between within these regions. We don't have a ton of trading in between these channels. So that's what I'm looking at. Near term tomorrow, bullish CPI, looking for potential retest of this top green line here. Mainly just want an accumulation day, maybe a breakout in the morning and accumulate in this upper region below this white line, and then give our big move on Thursday. But that's what I'm looking at on the near term. Hopefully that helps you guys out a little bit. I'll try and be more active on Twitter and updating you guys throughout the day. So appreciate you tuning in, whether it's morning, evening, whatever it may be around the world. You guys rock, and it's such a pleasure kind of sharing my information with you and just hearing some of the feedback you guys got. So keep it easy. I'll be in Rico's Discord. You know where to find me. And they're live trading with the guys, shooting different ideas off of each other. So look forward to CPI in the morning and seeing what the day is going to bring. Other than that, have a great rest of your trading week, and we'll be tuned in hopefully before the end of the week. If not, I'm planning on doing a Saturday morning and a Sunday night video. So look forward to that, and all the